Freezing rain battered her bruised skin, pasting the ruined silk of her wedding gown to her shivering frame. When Damien pulled his armored car to the curb, his only intention was to clear the sobbing runaway off his territory. He never suspected that the trembling bride, now seeking refuge in his passenger seat, belonged to the exact man he was hunting down to kill. The rain in Boston that October night didn't just fall, it slammed against the pavement like shattered glass. Damien Rousseau was sitting in the back of his armored Maybach, nursing a headache and a glass of scotch. To the public, he was the CEO of Rousseau Logistics. To the underworld, he was the man who controlled the eastern seaboard's port operations, gambling rings, and the silencing of loose ends. His driver, Leo, navigated the slick streets near Beacon Hill. They had just finished a tense sit-down with Judge Harrison, a man whose gambling debts Damien had conveniently purchased to ensure his loyalty in his upcoming federal hearings. "Take the alley behind Commonwealth Avenue, Leo," Damien muttered, rubbing his temples. "I want to avoid the main thoroughfare." "Yes, boss." As the massive car turned down the narrow, dimly lit cobblestone alley, the headlights cut through the torrential downpour and illuminated a pathetic sight. Huddled beneath the crumbling stone archway of an abandoned parish was a woman. She was drowning in a sea of white tulle and French lace, the extravagant fabric soaked grey with mud and street runoff. Her arms were wrapped tightly around her knees, and even from inside the soundproof cabin of the Maybach, Damien could see the violent tremors shaking her frail body. She was a bride, and she was entirely alone in the worst part of his city at 2 a.m. "Keep driving," Damien said instinctively. He was not a savior. His hands were stained with too much blood to play the Good Samaritan. But as the car rolled slowly past her, she looked up. The street lamp caught her face. Her makeup was ruined, black streaks of mascara tracking down pale, porcelain cheeks, but it was her eyes that stopped him. They were a piercing, shattered green. They held a frantic, feral terror, the look of an animal that had chewed off its own leg to escape a steel trap. "Stop the car," he ordered. Leo hit the brakes. "Boss, it's not safe to linger here." "I said stop." Damien didn't bother with an umbrella. He pushed open the heavy door and stepped out into the freezing deluge. The rain instantly soaked through his Brioni suit. But he ignored it. His gaze locked on the girl. As he approached, she scrambled backward, pressing her spine against the unforgiving stone of the church, her bare, bleeding feet slipping on the wet cobblestones. "Don't come near me," she screamed, her voice hoarse and broken. She held up a jagged piece of a broken glass bottle, her hands shaking violently. "I'll kill you, I swear to God. I'll kill you." Damien stopped just out of her reach, keeping his hands visible but relaxed. "If you try to stab me with that, you'll likely slip. Drop it, and I'll end up taking it from you," he said, his voice deliberately flat and calm over the roar of the rain. "Put it down. You're freezing to death. Leave me alone," she sobbed, the glass wavering in her grip. "Look at you," Damien said, his tone hardening just enough to command authority. "You're hypothermic. You have no shoes. You're wearing $50,000 worth of ruined Vera Wang in an alley where people get gutted for a $20 bill. Now, drop the glass and get in my car." She blinked, the freezing rain matting her blonde hair to her skull. She looked at the idling black car, then back to him. The fight seemed to drain out of her all at once, leaving only hollow exhaustion. The piece of glass slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the ground. Without a word, Damien took off his suit jacket and draped it over her trembling, bare shoulders. She flinched at his touch but didn't pull away. He guided her to the Maybach, opening the rear door. "Get in!" She slid into the plush leather interior, pulling her ruined skirts in with her. He got in beside her, the smell of damp earth, rain, and expensive floral perfume filling the cabin. "Drive, Leo, to the penthouse." As the car pulled away, the warmth of the heater blasted over them. The girl pulled his jacket tighter around herself, her teeth chattering so violently he could hear the click of her jaw. "What is your name?" Damien asked quietly, pouring a clean glass of scotch from the console. He held it out to her. She stared at the amber liquid for a long moment before taking the glass with trembling hands. She took a sip, coughing as the alcohol burned her throat. "Cecilia," she whispered. "Cecilia," Damien repeated, tasting the name. "Well, Cecilia, you're going to tell me exactly what you're running from. Because out here, the monsters don't stop hunting just because it's raining." She looked at him, her green eyes wide with a mix of gratitude and lingering terror. She had no idea the man sitting next to her was the biggest monster of them all. Damien's penthouse, overlooking the Boston Harbor, was a fortress disguised as a luxury residence. Bulletproof glass, private elevators, and armed guards stationed in the lobby ensured that nothing came through his doors without his explicit permission. When they arrived, Damien handed Cecilia off to Maria, his longtime housekeeper, who asked no questions. Maria was used to cleaning up his messes, though usually they involved blood, not runaway brides. Half an hour later, Damien was sitting in his study, the fireplace roaring, scanning the city's police scanners and his syndicate's encrypted chatter. Things were quiet. Too quiet. The heavy mahogany doors clicked open. Cecilia stood in the doorway. She was wearing one of his black cashmere sweaters, which swallowed her petite frame, falling midway down her thighs. Her blonde hair was towel-dried, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. The dirt and ruined makeup had been scrubbed away, revealing a devastatingly beautiful, aristocratic face. But the shadows of exhaustion beneath her eyes remained. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to the leather armchair opposite his desk. She walked over slowly and sat, pulling her legs up underneath her defensively. "Better?" Damien asked. "Yes. Thank you. Mr. Just Damien." He lied smoothly by omission. "Now, Cecilia, I am not a patient man, and I don't run a charity. You were running from a wedding, not a small one, judging by the dress. Who were you leaving at the altar?" She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously into the fabric of his sweater. "My father is Richard Montgomery," she began, her voice a fragile whisper. Damien paused. Richard Montgomery, the real estate tycoon, the man who had been building luxury high-rises across the city, only to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 3 months ago amidst rumors of severe embezzlement and illegal loans. "Your father owes money," Damien stated. It wasn't a question. Cecilia nodded, a bitter, tearful laugh escaping her lips. $30 million. He borrowed it from the wrong people to keep his company afloat. When he couldn't pay, they came for him. They threatened to kill him, to kill my little sister. She looked up, her eyes blazing with sudden, furious tears. So he made a deal. He traded me. I was supposed to marry the man who holds his debt, a peace offering, a permanent hostage to ensure my father's future compliance. Damien leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The underworld was a small, vicious ecosystem. Debt for flesh was an old-school tactic, brutal but effective. And tonight was the wedding. Yes, she choked out, at the cathedral. But right before I walked down the aisle, I overheard his men talking in the antechamber. I heard what he does to women who displease him. I heard about his first wife, the one who supposedly died in a boating accident. Cecilia shuddered violently. I couldn't do it. I found a side door. I ran through the kitchens, out into the alley, and just kept running until I collapsed where you found me. He watched her carefully. She was brave. He'd give her that. Foolish, but brave. You haven't told me his name. Cecilia, who is the man you left standing at the altar? She hesitated, her breathing shallow. She looked around the opulent, quiet study, as if expecting the shadows to suddenly sprout teeth. His name, she whispered, terrified the very walls might hear her, is Arthur Sterling. The name hit the room like a physical shockwave. For a long, suspended second, the only sound was the crackle of the fire in the hearth. Damien's expression remained entirely neutral, a mask of stone carved over a decade of surviving in a cutthroat world. But inside, his blood turned to ice, and then to pure, molten fire. Arthur Sterling, the head of the Sterling crime family, the man who controlled the western territories of Massachusetts, the man who had ordered a hit on Damien's younger brother 3 years ago, a hit that had left his brother paralyzed from the waist down. Arthur Sterling was his mortal enemy. They had been locked in a bloody, covert turf war for years, a war that was rapidly approaching a breaking point. And his prized possession, his $30 million bride, was currently sitting in Damien's living room, wearing his sweater. A dark, twisted amusement began to coil in his chest. Sterling was a proud, arrogant bastard. To be left at the altar was a public humiliation he would never forgive. He would burn Boston to the ground looking for her. You shouldn't have run, Damien said softly, standing up from his desk. He walked slowly around to where she sat. Cecilia looked up at him, sensing the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. The protective savior was gone. The predator had stepped out from the shadows. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling again. "I told you. He's a monster. He would have killed me eventually." "He might have," Damien agreed, stopping right in front of her chair. "Arthur Sterling is a ruthless, sadistic animal. He runs the largest illegal arms trade in New England. He doesn't forgive, and he certainly doesn't forget." Cecilia's breath hitched. How do you know that?" Damien looked down at her. Seeing the exact moment the realization began to dawn in those beautiful green eyes. She looked at the expensive art on his walls, the heavy mahogany desk, the visible gun holster discarded carelessly on the side table. "Because, Cecilia," he said, his voice dropping to a smooth, lethal register, "in order to fight a monster, you have to be a bigger one." He reached out, his knuckles gently brushing against her pale, warm cheek. She froze, entirely paralyzed by the sudden, terrifying shift in his demeanor. "My full name isn't just Damien," he whispered, holding her terrified gaze. "It's Damien Russo." He watched the color drain completely from her face. Even a sheltered girl like Cecilia Montgomery knew the name Russo. It was whispered in the city's high society circles with a mixture of awe and absolute terror. The rival king, the devil of the docks. "No," she breathed, shrinking back into the leather chair. "No, please." You jumped from the frying pan directly into the fire, little bird. he said softly. "Please let me go," she begged, tears spilling over her lashes once more. "I won't tell anyone I was here. I'll leave the city. I'll disappear." "Disappear?" Damien let out a low, dark chuckle. "Do you have any idea the gift you've just handed me?" Arthur Sterling humiliated, scrambling in the dark for his runaway bride, while I have her locked away in my tower. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "You aren't going anywhere. Cecilia, you belong to me now, and Arthur Sterling is going to tear this city apart, bleeding out his resources, trying to find you." She closed her eyes, a silent sob racking her chest as the gravity of her situation crashed over her. She hadn't escaped the Mafia. She had just traded one ruthless boss for another. But as Damien looked at her, trembling and broken in his chair, a dangerous, possessive thought crossed his mind. She was meant to be a pawn, a tool to destroy his enemy. Yet, looking at the fire that had sparked in her eyes before, she realized who he was. He knew keeping her was going to be the most dangerous game he had ever played. Arthur Sterling's war drums were already beating in the distance. The real bloodshed was just about to begin. For the first week, Damien's penthouse in the Seaport district became a gilded cage for Cecilia. He gave her the guest suite, unlimited access to a black card for online deliveries from Bergdorf Goodman, and explicit orders never to step foot near the private elevator. She was a ghost haunting his hallways, wrapped in expensive Loro Piana cashmere, jumping at every shadow. The city, meanwhile, was burning. Arthur Sterling did exactly what Damien predicted. Humiliated in front of New England's most dangerous men, he tore through Boston like a rabid dog. In 3 days, 2 of Damien's import warehouses in South Boston were torched. A dock worker on his payroll was found floating in the Charles River. The underground channels were deafening with the sound of Arthur's rage. He had put a $2 million bounty on any information regarding his missing bride. Damien was sitting in the war room of his penthouse, a map of the city spread out over the mahogany table, when Lorenzo, his underboss, threw a stack of photographs down in front of him. Sterling hit the club in the North End. Lorenzo growled, his jaw ticking. Shot up the facade. Took out 2 of our bouncers. He's leaving a message. Boss, he knows we have her. Or at least, he suspects it. Let him suspect, Damien replied smoothly, though a vein pulsed in his temple. Sterling is acting on emotion. Emotion makes men sloppy. Double the guard on the ports and tell the men to shoot any Sterling associate on sight. We are officially at war. As Lorenzo left, Damien rubbed his eyes, the exhaustion of a 72-hour week catching up to him. A soft rustle of fabric drew his attention. Cecilia stood in the doorway. The terrified, shivering girl from the alley was gone, replaced by a woman whose sharp, aristocratic features were set in a mask of heavy guilt. She had heard Lorenzo. "How many?" she asked, her voice trembling but surprisingly clear. "How many what?" Damien poured a glass of Macallan 18, not offering her any. "How many people have died because I was too cowardly to marry him?" she demanded, stepping into the room. Her green eyes flashed with a sudden, desperate fire. "I saw the news. Damien, the fire in South Boston, the shooting in the North End. That's him, isn't it? He's looking for me." "It is," Damien admitted, leaning against the edge of the table. "But you flatter yourself if you think this is purely about a broken heart. You bruised his ego. Worse, you cost him leverage. Your father's company owns key real estate zoning rights that Arthur needs to move his illegal weapons shipments undetected. Without you, he loses his grip on your father. Then give me back she whispered. The words sounded like shattered glass. Damien froze, the glass of whiskey halting halfway to his mouth. He looked at her, truly looked at her. She was terrified of Arthur, yet she was willing to walk back into hell just to stop the collateral damage. It was a foolish, naive sentiment, one that had absolutely no place in his world. And yet, it struck a chord deep inside his chest that he thought had died years ago. No. He set the glass down with a sharp clack. Damien, people are dying. My people die every day. Cecilia. Damien snapped, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. She gasped, backing up until her shoulders hit the heavy oak bookshelves. He planted his hands on the shelves on either side of her head, trapping her. You think giving yourself back to that animal will stop the bloodshed? He murmured, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate register. If I hand you over, he will torture you just to prove a point. Then, he will kill your father, take the company, and use those ports to bring in enough firepower to wipe my family off the map. You are the only thing standing between Arthur Sterling and total control. Her breath hitched, her chest rising and falling rapidly against his chest. The scent of her vanilla and rain clouded his senses. He looked down at her lips, slightly parted in shock. He had taken her as a pawn, a weapon to wield against his enemy. But looking at her now, feeling the fierce, frantic heat of her spirit, the lines were beginning to blur. You didn't start this war. Little bird, Damien whispered, lifting a hand to tuck a stray blonde curl behind her ear. His thumb grazed her jawline. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, a micro-movement that sent a jolt of pure electricity straight to his core. I did, years ago. You are just the spark that finally ignited the powder keg. I'm scared, Damien, she confessed, a tear slipping free. Don't be, he said, leaning down until his lips brushed against the soft skin of her cheek. Because as long as you are in my house, Arthur Sterling will have to climb over my dead body to get to you. The tension that had been building between them for a week finally snapped. She turned her face, closing the fraction of an inch between them, and kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, bruising, and tasted of salt and whiskey. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him, a low groan vibrating in his chest as the cold, calculating Mafia boss died, and the man underneath took over. But their fragile sanctuary was living on borrowed time. The devil was already inside the gates. The betrayal didn't come from a rival gang. It came from the front seat of Damien's own car. It was a Tuesday night. He was supposed to be at a sit-down with the 5 families in New York. But a last-minute gut instinct made him turn the private jet around before takeoff. He drove himself back to the penthouse, intending to surprise Cecilia. When he stepped out of the private elevator, the silence in the penthouse was wrong. It wasn't the quiet of a sleeping house. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a drawn breath before a scream. His hand instantly went to the Sig Sauer P226 holstered at his hip. He drew the weapon, moving silently down the marble hallway. I told you, you stupid bitch. If you scream, I'll put a bullet in your kneecap before I hand you over. The voice came from the living room. It was Leo, his driver, a man who had eaten at his table for 6 years. Damien peered around the edge of the hallway. Leo had a Glock pressed hard against Cecilia's temple. She was on her knees, her hands bound behind her back with zip ties, her face deathly pale. Sitting on the custom Italian leather sofa, smoking one of Damien's imported cigars. Was Arthur Sterling? Punctuality was never your strong suit, Leo. Arthur sneered, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke suit. He was a handsome man in a serpentine way, with cold, dead eyes. Take her down to the freight elevator. My men are waiting in the garage. Once she's secure, you get the rest of your money. Leo grabbed Cecilia by the hair, hauling her roughly to her feet. She let out a muffled cry. That was the moment the world went red. Damien stepped out from the hallway, raising his weapon. You're not going anywhere, Leo. Arthur laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He didn't even flinch. Damien, I was wondering when you'd show up. I hear you've been keeping my bride warm. Drop the gun, Leo, Damien ordered, ignoring Arthur completely. His eyes were locked on his driver. Do it now, and I'll make your death quick. Leo panicked. His hand shook. Sorry, boss. Sterling offered me 10 million and a ticket to Dubai. I couldn't pass it up. Leo shifted his aim from Cecilia toward Damien. He was fast, but Damien was faster. Damien fired 2 rounds. The first shattered Leo's shoulder. The second took him square in the chest. He dropped like a stone, his blood pooling on the Persian rug. But the distraction cost him. Before Damien could pivot his weapon, Arthur drew a compact Beretta from his jacket and fired. Pain, hot and blinding, exploded in Damien's side. He stumbled back against the wall, dropping to one knee as a bullet tore through his ribs. His gun clattered to the floor, sliding out of reach across the polished marble. You always were arrogant, Damien, Arthur mocked, standing up slowly. He aimed the Beretta at Damien's head, his smile twisting into something sadistic. Taking what belongs to me. Did you really think you could win after I blow your brains out? I'm taking Cecilia home. I'm going to make her watch as I burn her father alive. And then she's going to spend the rest of her miserable life begging for my permission to breathe. Arthur cocked the hammer. Goodbye. Rousseau. Bang. The gunshot was deafening, but the bullet didn't hit Damien. Arthur's eyes went wide. He swayed on his feet, looking down at his chest in absolute disbelief. A dark, rapidly expanding blossom of red stained his immaculate white shirt. He dropped the gun, gasping for air, and collapsed forward onto the glass coffee table, shattering it into 1,000,000 pieces. Damien looked up, clutching his bleeding side, standing behind where Arthur had been, trembling violently, was Cecilia. Her bound hands had restricted her, but she had managed to kick the dropped Sig Sauer across the floor with her bare feet, contort her body, and scoop it up in her zip-tied hands. Smoke was still curling from the barrel. The runaway bride had just executed the most feared Mafia boss in New England. She dropped the gun and fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. Damien, oh my God, Damien, you're bleeding. I'm all right. He gritted out, though his vision was swimming. He reached up with a blood-stained hand, cupping the back of her neck, pulling her forehead down to rest against his. You did it, little bird. You killed the monster. I thought he was going to kill you, she sobbed, her tears mixing with the blood on his shirt. I couldn't let him take you from me. In the chaotic aftermath, as Damien's loyal men flooded the penthouse and paramedics rushed him onto a stretcher, he refused to let go of her hand. The war was over. With Arthur dead, the Sterling family would fracture and crumble. He had won the city, but as they loaded him into the ambulance, Cecilia holding tightly to his hand, Damien realized the city was no longer his greatest prize. 2 weeks later, Damien stood in the private gardens of his estate, leaning heavily on a silver-handled cane. The autumn air was crisp. Cecilia walked toward him, not in a ruined white gown of terror, but in a simple, elegant red dress that mirrored the blood they had spilled to be together. She wasn't a hostage anymore. She wasn't a pawn. He pulled her into his arms, the pain in his ribs a dull ache compared to the burning heat of her lips against his. Arthur Sterling had thought he was buying a submissive wife. Instead, he had delivered a queen right to the devil's doorstep. And God help anyone who ever tried to take her from him again. Are you ready to dive deeper into the underworld if this Mafia romance had your heart racing? Make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow dark romance lovers. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling, pulse-pounding stories of danger, betrayal, and twisted love. Drop a comment below. Would you have pulled the trigger? Let us know. And stay tuned for the next dark chapter.